Hello and welcome to A Real Blogger versus Alex Inc. I am your host, Pokematic. Another frustrating episode of Alex Inc. What was the blogger conflict this time around? Alex doesn't know what his name is going to be. This is episode 5 of the series. We've had multiple conflicts already as to what all these other problems that don't happen immediately in the production of a podcast. And the one problem that actually does happen at the beginning of a podcast was not dealt with at the beginning of the series. Okay, let's get one thing straight here. If you are making a podcast, a video series, a web series, a blog, anything, the second thing that you settle on is the name. The first thing that you settle on is the content. In the first episode, they settled on the content. On the second episode, they settled on the name. That's what they should have done, but no, they settled on it on episode 5. This episode should have been episode 2. I took 2 episodes to figure out what I'm going to call this. At first, I was thinking, first I didn't think I was going to make it past episode 1. Then I ended up doing a second episode. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just call it the rest of the TV logs that I do. And then I thought, no, I like A Real Blogger versus Alex Inc. And that's what I call this series. And maybe I'm just spoiled. Maybe it's just because that I'm gifted at coming up with names. No, not necessarily, because I come up with names pretty easily. I think that a lot of people kind of come up with names kind of easily. I don't think that Mr. Enter spent a whole lot of time trying to come up with animated atrocities. I mean, he had to probably spend a little bit of time coming up with animated atrocities when he found out that Infamous Animations was already taken. But I don't think that he took a whole lot of time coming up with the Admiral animations. I don't think that Matt Pat spent a whole lot of time thinking up what he's going to call game theory. I don't think the Angry Video Game Nerd spent a whole lot of time thinking what he's going to call the Angry Video Game Nerd, because he's a gamer, he's a nerd that plays video games, and he's angry. What should he call that? I don't think Irate Gamer spent a whole lot of time trying to come up with what he's going to call the Irate Gamer, because he's a gamer that's irate, but he can't be the angry gamer because that name was already taken. I don't think that the Nostalgia Critic or the Cinema Snob or the Nostalgia Chick or Todd in the Shadows spent a whole lot of time trying to come up with their names. And here's the thing. On the internet, it's just like we take simple. Cinema Sins, they did the Sincast. That's the name of their podcast because it's a podcast by the guys that do Cinema Sins. How'd they come up with the name Cinema Sins? Well, it's Everything Wrong With It, and Everything Wrong With, that's a pretty easy name, but we gotta come up with an easier name. How about Cinema Sins? And the guy that runs the alternative show, he calls it Cinema Wins because it's the good things. It's not necessarily that hard to come up with a name for something. But, let's just run with it. Let's just assume that it's difficult. You don't come up with a name in episode 5. You don't do this for a while, and you don't run a web series for a bit before you come up with a name. You might experiment 1 or 2 episodes of your series, but let's assume that each episode of Alex Inc. represents them making 1 episode of his podcast. It's not going to take him 4 episodes to come up with the name of a podcast. At least it shouldn't take him 4 episodes to come up with the name of a podcast, because by that time, you lose the interest. You lost the branding. That's not technically an episode of your series then. At least that's how I see it. And what is it? I think that his podcast is about his blended life and life families and family craziness. And it's just like, okay, you're going to come up with that. Let's see, I don't know a whole lot about his family life and what exactly it's about. But it's just like, what would be a good name? I don't know. Dad Tries or whatever. See, it's hard for me to say because I don't really know what his podcast is about. And I get that the series is not necessarily about Alex and his podcast. I get that. I get that it's not necessarily about the podcast. It's the process of making the podcast. But, and then they go with, after everything, then there is the other conflict of this episode. The other conflict is about the mother-in-law coming for a visit. And the mother-in-law is condescending because what Alex does is not good enough for her daughter. Her daughter could have married a doctor and whatnot. It's the typical mother-in-law cliche thing. The condescending mother-in-law who anything that the husband does is not good enough for my girl, sort of a deal, and whatnot. And okay, I'll give them that. That's a common cliche story plot. But then they say what the reason is. The reason that the mother-in-law came for a visit is not because she just came for a visit. That's what I was expecting that to be. I thought that this was just the mother-in-law coming for a visit, and that's where that conflict comes from, because that's normally how these episodes go. But no, the mother-in-law was called in by the wife in order to help out with the family. Because Alex doesn't spend enough time at home, and the wife is too busy at her day job. This could have been avoided if they did podcasts right. Podcasts. You film them in your house. You film them in your garage. You do this at home. It's a stay-at-home job until you get to the point where you need to take it to an office. But you start out at home. And it could have just been that the mother-in-law came for a visit for episode 2, and she's condescending on Alex, and it would have worked much better as episode 2, because then we would have been introduced to her as a character. We could have seen her happen, and she could have been not believing in this dream that they have. And that's what it could have been, and it could have been that. And maybe she would have been just a one-off. Maybe she would have been coming back for more episodes. I know normally when they do the condescending mother-in-law or condescending father-in-law, they normally wait until later on in the series. But when she's so crucial to coming up with the name and whatnot, and maybe she might end up coming back, but we get some other one-off characters in early episodes. I mean, episode 5 is technically still kind of early, so episode 2 wouldn't have been that much of a stretch. It would have been a little hard if she came in episode 1, but being that it's episode 2, she could have come in and done the problem then. And it could have been that she just came for a visit. And she could have seen that Alex is having trouble coming up with the name and being all condescending of, oh, you think that you can make a radio show, an internet podcast, but you can't even come up with a name? Ha ha ha, you're doomed to fail. And that, it would have been so much more believable because, this series. Yeah, there's so much wrong with it. And it's just so poorly made. And it's done in such a way that it just infuriates me to the point that I need to make a podcast about it to counter all the wrong things and why this is wrong. And the problem with they can't come up with the name of them trying to get the startup and get everything running, it would be fine if it wasn't a podcast. Because honestly, all you need to do for a podcast, you don't even necessarily need the microphone. You could just use the integrated microphone on your webcam. I've done that for years. It's all you really need to do, and most of the time the audio quality is good enough. Most people are forgiving in the beginning. Most people understand that you're just getting your footing. Sure, the barrier for entry is incredibly low now, considering that everyone has an HD video camera in their pocket. As long as you have a smartphone, unlike me, who still has a dumb phone, but I still have an HD video camcorder. And a Rock Band microphone. Rock Band microphone. Got it for $10 got it for $5 at Goodwill even. It's that simple. They're making this way too hard, and they just don't know anything about running a podcast. This has been Pokematic signing off and bye-bye. Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the end card. So, Alex Inc. Yeah. I'm a masochist. And even then, normally when I'm a masochist with this sort of stuff, I normally can find some masochistic entertainment out of it. Not Alex Inc. It's just so poorly written that I can't even laugh at it. Because everything's taken so earnestly. Everything's done in such a way that they it's just so obvious that they don't know anything about it. And it's not in a funny, cringy way. It's just that it's produced in such a way that it's not even self-aware that it's bad. Yeah. And again, if I don't even know this, I've been binging the first 5 episodes because I saw that the episode 2 and episode 3 were going to expire out of my Hulu queue, so I decided I better watch them. And then it just snowballed into this, and now I'm 5 episodes in. I'm both the real blogger versus Alex Inc. and of Alex Inc. So, I guess I'm not necessarily looking forward to the next episode, but hopefully, fingers crossed, they've run through all the different problems that they had. Yeah. And even when it comes to names, if you can't come up with a name for your podcast, you just name it something dumb like the Completely Unnecessary Podcast or the Not So Common Podcast, like Pat the NES Punk did. Or you just call it the Alex Podcast or the Pokematic Podcast even, like I did. Okay. End card things. If you enjoyed my rant, hopefully you get enjoyment out of this because I'm not. But I like making content, and I'm a glutton for punishments. Yeah, I don't like the series, but I like ranting about the series. So if you enjoyed my rant, give it a like. If you want to see more from me, subscribe. I've got Patreon for $1 a month. You can get your name in the Patreon credits section. I've also got a Bitcoin Faucet Rotator if you don't like Patreon. Get free Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin, Dashcoin, and help support the show while at the same time getting them for free. And I've been doing this for 9 years. Check out the website to see all my credentials. Okay, I'm far more qualified to write a TV show about making a podcast than these guys are. This has been Pokematic. I gotta go. I got a break. Bye. Catch you later.